Hi, Nine. So this is our third lesson on Shakespeare's use of language, and today we're going to be zooming in on the power of individual words and expressions. So, how individual words or phrases can create an effect on the audience or on meaning. Now, to go through this, basically we are going to be looking at the idea of imagery. Okay, and imagery is what these individual words and expressions are going to be doing. So these individual words and expressions are going to be using imagery. Okay. Now, imagery itself can be broken into three separate areas. So we'll be looking today at simile and metaphors and personification. Okay. So it's those three elements that we're going to be looking at, but we're actually going to be starting off with imagery itself. So, imagery is what we're going to start with, okay? And imagery is basically when words are given to the reader or to the audience in a way that are encouraging us to put a picture into our minds. So, the words that we are told creates a picture uh, in our imagination, okay? So, the two that we're going to look at for this task are here in this red box. Okay, there's two quotes in there. One's from Lady Anne in Act 4, Scene 1, and the other is from Queen Elizabeth, also in Act 1, in Act 4, Scene 1. Okay, it's the same scene, but two different characters speaking. Lady Anne's first, okay? So what she says is that she's explaining her feelings about her life now that she's queen because her husband Richard has become king. Would to God that the inclusive verge of golden metal that must round my brow were red hot steel to sear me to the brains. And within that quotation, there are these phrases and words that have got this power to create a picture in our imagination, to create an image. But some of these words aren't very clear, or they're not necessarily understand it. You can't really understand them straight away. So, inclusive verge. That might not be very obvious, but maybe golden metal is. And round my brow, well, your brow is this part of your head here. So what piece of golden metal must go round her brow? And straight away, you think, golden metal goes on there, it must be a crown. And inclusive verge is all that means is a circle with an edge to it. Okay? So basically, she's describing the crown. It's circular, it's made of metal, golden metal, and it sits on her brow. Okay? That's what she's describing. The second two, or the second part, is where she uh, says what she thinks it should be. So rather than golden metal, she thinks it should be red hot steel, and sear means to burn or to scorch. So she's talking about the crown and how she feels it should be. Okay, or what she thinks it should be in her position. So the question is, explain what picture is created in your imagination by Anne's language. So describe, explain what picture you get. And the second part here is to, what does this image reveal about her feelings about becoming queen? So when you work out what the picture in your imagination is, what does that tell you about her feelings about being queen? Now the second image here is from Elizabeth. And Elizabeth says, "Pity, you ancient stones, those tender babes, whom envy hath immured within your walls. Rough cradle for such little pretty ones." So she's talking here about two things: the two princes and the Tower of London. And what I want you to do is look at the language and try and work out what pictures is she creating of the Tower of London, and what pictures is she creating of her sons, the two princes. And one of those pictures, what kind of feelings do they indicate that she has about both those things? So, the princes first. She describes the princes as tender babes and little pretty ones. Okay, so what do those words do to put a picture in your imagination? What picture do you get of the sons with those words that she's chosen to describe them by? And then for the Tower of London itself, um, she describes them as ancient stones, immured. Immured is another word for imprisoned or kind of trapped within your walls. Rough cradle. So, what picture is she now creating of the Tower of London with those words? And together, do these two pictures link? Are they separate pictures, or do they kind of create one image in your imagination? And what is her feelings about the situation between the Sons and the Tower of London? Now, while you're working on those two yellow boxes, so just pause the video here, just take some time to answer those questions or to complete those tasks, and then we'll move on. Okay, so when you've finished, press play again, and we'll go on to the next part of the power of individual words and expressions. So the next focus is the simile. And similes, as I hope you are well aware, is when something is compared to something else using the words like or as. Okay, so here we have a simile, there's the word like, so straight away we're happy we're dealing with this as a simile. And the quote goes, I, a bit missing, that's what the dots represent, like a poor bark of sails and tackling reft, rush all to pieces on thy rocky bosom. So we're focusing on the simile. And the simile is like a poor bark of sails and tackling reft, rush all to pieces on thy rocky bosom. It's quite a long simile. And you might, first of all, have to try and work out what she's going on about. So the orange box here, what is a simile? What is she using to describe a situation? Try and translate it into modern English. Okay? And then think about the use of that simile. How does the simile make her words or the idea she's trying to convey more powerful? Okay, so by putting her idea into a simile, how does that make her the situation or the way she's talking more powerful? Why is the effect increased or enhanced by using a simile? Move on to metaphor next. So metaphor. And as you know, a metaphor is when something is transformed into something else. Okay, so something is turned completely from one thing into another. Not a comparison like a simile, it's a complete transformation. And here we've got a speech from one of the characters we don't know as well as the others. This is from Queen Margaret. And Queen Margaret is not in the film version that we watched, that I kind of presented to you. Instead, what the screenplay does, what the directors did there with the writers, is they used Richard's mother, the Duchess of York, and Queen Margaret, and kind of combined the two characters into one. So, this is the speech. Poor painted queen, who strewest thou sugar? Well, so, poor painted queen, why strewest thou sugar on that bottled spider, whose deadly web ensnareth thee about? Fool, fool, thou whetst a knife to kill thyself. The day will come that thou shalt wish for me to help thee curse that poisonous bunch-backed toad. So, in this speech, there are metaphors which are used to imagine Richard, to describe Richard. So your job, first of all, is to spot the really negative metaphors that are used to describe Richard. And then once you've spotted them, think about and explain how these particular metaphors affect and alter or kind of influence the audience's thoughts about Richard. Okay, so what is it about these metaphors in this speech that kind of influences the audience's thoughts about Richard? All right, that's clear. Let's move on to personification. So, personification is when human characteristics are given to a non-human thing. So something that isn't human could be a table or a tree or anything, or an animal, is given some kind of personality, some kind of emotions, or some kind of physical attributes. So the first one, I'm trying to make it a little bit easier. I've used a blue highlighter on this slide for any moments of personification. First one here in the kind of the grey-green box. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasings of a lute. So in that first one, the first question is, what is being personified? So what non-living thing is being given a human character or personality? And then explain how that personification creates an effect on the audience. So what's been, first of all, what's been personified? That's a simple answer. It could be one word. And then secondly, how is this creating a powerful effect on the audience? You know, how does this use of personification change the audience's or affect the audience's understanding or feelings? Right, the second one here in the middle. This is from Elizabeth. Elizabeth says, "The tiger hath seized the gentle hind when she learns Richard has removed her brother Lord Rivers." So, first of all, the personification is there. It's she's talking about Richard and she's talking about Lord Rivers. Okay, so you can work out, I think, fairly obviously, which part of this quotation means Richard and which part means Lord Rivers. So the question is, what meaning and effect is being created here in this personification by using these animals, but giving the animals kind of human abilities? What is she suggesting about Richard, and what is she suggesting about Lord Rivers? And finally, the third one, death hath snatched my husband from mine arms and plucked two crutches from my feeble hands. What meaning and effect is being created here? Okay, so this is the Duchess of York speaking here, or it might be Elizabeth. No, I think it's the Duchess of York, and she's talking about some of the troubles she's had in her life. Now, the question is, what meaning and effect is being created here? So, by using personification, what does she mean, and what's the effect? Okay. Now, just so you understand the character, her husband has died, and two of her children have also died. Okay, so that might help you explain the meaning of what she's saying. Okay, right. Think about what the personification is saying about death here. What kind of character has death been given in this quotation? And that's kind of where your answer should be. Right, year 9. So we've been looking at powerful individual words and expressions today. Hopefully you have spent a good bit of time just focusing on the language and explaining and exploring how meaning is being created through these techniques. And I look forward to seeing what your thoughts and feelings and ideas are about these quotations. Okay. If you've got any trouble, if you find this difficult, please drop me an email or put a comment in Google Classroom, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay? Right, take care, folks, and bye for now.